SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.
Want to cut your heating costs this season? With a highly efficient York heating and air conditioning system, you can save up to 50% in energy costs while enjoying tax credits and TVA energy rebates as much as $3,000. Your local York dealer. Visit harbonair.com to schedule a free evaluation of your system.
I'm Steve Azar, and I'm on the other side of the microphone, meaning I'm asking the questions this time, and oh, have mercy for the airwaves. I spent 20 years in Music City, wrote and made some hits, traveled the world, and then moved my family back to the birthplace of American music and where the magnolia trees prosper. And now every time I put my feet on Mississippi soil, when I'm off the road, well, I'm at peace. On this show, it's all about hearing the stories straight from the mouths of the friends I've made along the way, their journey to success. Heck, there might be someone on, I don't even know, but you know how us Mississippi types are. We tend to take well to new company. In a Mississippi Minute, all 60 of them. I'm Steve Azar. It's just like that muddy river, moving slow. Ain't no worries, it's how life goes, baby. In a Mississippi Minute. That's right.
Hey folks, time for another In a Mississippi Minute. I'm Steve Azar, grateful for you guys allowing me to learn to listen every day on this show. It's been a blessing into my 8th year. Really love it. Thanks to the team at SuperTalk Mississippi. Reminding you that my pals also are over there in Macon, Mississippi, producing the best catfish there is. Go to superiorcatfish.com. It's produced right here in Mississippi. And visit Mississippi.org, celebrating so many things, especially in the arts, which, you know, I like to turn to as much as we can. Today is part 2. Go to visit Mississippi.org, by the way. But today is part 2 with my dear friend, and let me get to that introduction as we speak. We met at B.B. King's Club Ebony, legendary, down in Indianola, Mississippi, which we had turned into a recording studio to make my Steve Azar and the King's Men record. He was part of the King's Men. Today's guest, tremendous educator, world-class musician, soulful. And I get the benefit of having him on stage ever since, and really getting to experience his love for the instrument that he plays, the saxophone, so incredibly well. It's always a blessing for me to be there with him. He is also a tremendous educator. We'll talk more about that. I really want to dig into that and what really drove him to make it his career, teaching kids music, which is one of our greatest natural resources. So let's get to it right now with the one and only in part 2, Dr. Alfonso Sanders. Hello, Doctor.
How you doing, Steve?
I'm rambling already this morning. I apologize.
No, it catches up with us as the day goes by.
Thank you for doing part 2 with me. I really appreciate it. You know, we get our chance to talk before shows, or this is the time I finally get to really dig into more detail about really what's made you tick your whole life. When I introduce you on stage and I talk about you educating and, even Jimmy Lee Jr., who's on stage with us, and so many tremendous musicians that have come along and made their way through life and become great human beings. I think you've touched so many people along the way. What got you into wanting to spend your career educating? I understand the music part. You could have chosen just to be playing in bands and writing music, but you chose the path of both.
Yeah, sometimes life unfolds for us. We can make all the decisions we want to, and you never know when or where the turning points will be. I had intended to be a professional trumpet player after falling in love with the instrument, and I think we talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
But I had an incident in my final year in college that prevented me from playing trumpet. I damaged my lip, my kind of nerves in my top lip, so I couldn't perform adequately. And I started teaching school. I didn't have another option except to finish college as an educator as opposed to a performer. So as I was teaching, of course, I noticed the students would leave the instruments, and I had a need to try to go back and complete that degree. I wanted to complete that degree and I asked a question at that time to the chair of the department, which was Herbert Coleman, a beautiful person, but he was adamant about the fact that you have to put one more recital on the books, and so I had to do it on a different instrument. So it took me about a year, sometimes 7-8 hours a day of working on saxophone to try to do a performance on it. I had to learn at least 6 pieces, about a 40-minute recital of a sort, and that happened.
Alfonso, what was real quick about the damage that was done? Was it because of your years playing the trumpet? And second question is, what's the difference? You're using your mouth, playing the saxophone. I don't understand the difference.
Well, it might be for many people. Well, first I didn't. Well, I had a knee pressing, which I wasn't familiar with woodwind instruments, other than I had taken some classes as an educator part to learn to teach young people how to position their embouchure, as they call it. Mm-hmm. And so you want to do your mouth correctly. But my nerve tissues were a result of playing incorrectly. I didn't have I didn't have any teachers when I started, because I was a baseball player who just stumbled in a musical instrument, which was left on the baseball field. And so from that point,
that blows my mind. But anyway, go ahead. It doesn't blow my mind, but go ahead.
So the guy played first base. I knew it very well. We were good friends, and so I took it home, and then of course I tried to explore learning, but I didn't know quite what to do. Like your question is how do you produce sound? So it really was my curiosity too, because I found out that my lip was the operating source to make sound through the trumpet, right? Yeah. And on the woodwind instrument, there's a mechanism called a reed that you place on the mouthpiece, and you put the mouthpiece inside your mouth and blow air across the reed, and the reed produces a sound, and you manipulate it.
So you were able to do the saxophone because of the reed.
Yeah, because I didn't have to have nothing pressing against my lip to produce a sound, or my lip didn't need to vibrate.
Yeah, trumpet doesn't have it. That's right. Trumpet doesn't have a reed. That's right.
So all the brass instruments operate like that, for those people who might not know that concept. But it took some adjusting, and of course, the interesting thing is my anxiety and being a little upset about not being able to do what I wanted to do in life turned into teaching, and I put a lot of energy. The same work ethic, I just put it into teaching, so I would make sure that I was teaching young students the correct thing, and having kind of, I don't call it a vendetta against that evil I thought, of losing my ability to play, because I had a lot of incorrect methodology and a lot of incorrect posture and other things with my face. So it led me into marching bands were notorious for trumpet players trying to learn to play high notes and show off, in the marching band. And so I kind of was one of those guys. And eventually it took my lip tissue to a place where it wasn't, I couldn't use it anymore. So, but I always made a note to say if I taught anybody, I would teach them all of the correct things, and I would be very observant. So I studied a lot, talked to a lot of teachers. I did a lot of research, stuff like that, stuff that I didn't know I was interested in, but it later proved to be that maybe I wasn't educated all along and just was trying to be a trumpet player. And then 20 plus years later, after I got an opportunity to get my doctorate degree. I started teaching when I left the University of Mississippi after 3 years there, teaching and getting my degree. And then I came to Delta State, which I spent 4 years. And I think, that's where I, found myself dabbling a little bit more involved with the jazz band program. So it led me back to at least being around students who were playing the brass instruments. And so when I left there in 2004, I went to Mississippi Valley State to serve as a chair of fine arts for them. And lo and behold, they were tearing down the building that had a repair shop in it. And it was the most unique degree at Valley, no longer has it, but they had instruments in there.
Let's do that on the other side of the break. Dr. Alfonso Sanders, tremendous educator, musician, phenomenal. I get to have the blessing every time I look back to my left, and there he is when I'm on stage now. And it's been one of the extras that I never thought I'd have when I moved back to the Mississippi Delta. Superior Catfish, come on. It's produced right here in Mississippi. There's catfish, there's Superior Catfish. Go to superiorcatfish.com and visit Mississippi.org. Come on, plan a road trip with your family and fall in love with your Mississippi. I'm Steve Azar.
All day and night, she hides behind the clouds, lights up this life. She's a pretty white dress, those faded blue jeans, a single word, and all it means. Gives her heart and soul to everything she does. My baby's tender and tough, tender and tough.
Listen and watch all your favorite SuperTalk Mississippi shows live and on demand. Listen to tons of music. Plus, get the latest breaking news from across the state with the SuperTalk Mississippi app. The SuperTalk Mississippi app. Download the SuperTalk app on your iPhone or Android device now for free. Just search SuperTalk Mississippi in your app store on your mobile device to get everything Mississippi all in one place. The SuperTalk Mississippi app. Get it now. Now for Mississippi.
Sign on the door says down home cooking. Yeah, I'm hungry, but I can't eat.
Rolling into a Mississippi Minute, as I often say, I've got Dr. Alfonso Sanders, just a wonderful educator, wonderful musician, one of the best. And I am always blessed to have him back there on stage when I look to my left, just over my left shoulder, and there he is. And it's awesome. It's just awesome. What else is awesome is what you can have at your house. You can have it ordered if you go to store.superiorcatfish.com. It's coming to you, and it'll be on your plate in no time. And visit Mississippi.org. Man, the wonderful folks over there. We are the birthplace of America's music, and I'm talking to one man that knows that. Spent a lot of time with B.B. King, and he has seen them all and played with them all, and I'm grateful to have him on. And we're talking education right now, but I want to back up for a second. You played trumpet last year when my song that was nominated for that on the Grammy record, Our Castle Is Your Home, on the Rock for Children record. I never asked you about this, and then you played the trumpet.
Well, yeah, I played on your other recording.
Tender and Tough. You played the trumpet.
Yeah, I did.
Well, you're able to play now because you know how?
Well, yeah, the nerve some way came back. That's what I was saying. I didn't know it, but it probably was closer to 30 years after that, because I was, coming out of college. And when I got the job at Valley State, as I mentioned, I went in this instrument repair shop that was being torn down to put up a science tech building. And I just happened to drive on the campus my first day on the job. And I stopped and realized they were tearing it down. And my question immediately was, has anybody looked in that building? Because I knew what probably was valuable in there, if there was anything left in there. From my college years, I thought maybe some of those relics would be there. So I stopped and asked the construction guys, is it okay if I go in and take a look in the building? Because they were about to demolish it down. Yeah, they had the demolition guys, and they said, well, we'll give you 10 or 15 minutes. You run through that, but said, we got to keep our schedule, so forth. So I went in and found the flugelhorn that I played today. I won't get rid of it. It doesn't play like I would wanted to play as a modern flugelhorn, because they have so many beautiful designs now, kind of like the guitar that you play. Yeah. They keep redesigning them, making them easier and better quality. But I say I took it. It was laying in the floor. So Dad,
they were about to tear this building down.
Wow. It was in there, and I went in, and that horn was laying in the floor, and along with some other instruments, I gathered them up, and also some other relics that I thought would be valuable for the history of the music department. So I did that, and then lo and behold, I put that flugelhorn in my office, and every day I would look at it as though it was my nemesis. So
I love
one day I decided, I'm going to take this to get a repair guy to get the keys working and, unstop all the tubing valves, so forth, because it'll lock up after years.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. And then I started dabbling with it, seeing if I could actually produce sound again. And I kept doing that for maybe some months, and all of a sudden my lips started, reacting to the vibration again. I don't play trumpet like I should be in terms of a real trumpet player, but I play well enough to do some of the things I do. I know my limitations on it,
Yeah.
But like I said, having studied after the fact, it taught me a lot more about what I should do to produce a better sound production on the horn without hurting myself again. So that, and of course the trumpet led me to the flute, and then when I got to the Mississippi Delta, as much as I made kind of humorous statements about the harmonica, I always thought that maybe I could play it, but then when I started trying to do that, I was talking to Terry Harmonica Bean about that yesterday as we finished our performance, and because I always asked him questions about the harmonica, and he showed me stuff. But I remember specifically playing with a lot of the harmonica players in the Delta,
Yeah.
And so I learned it, but it was a long hill to climb, one that I'd never thought I'd be doing. But that led to that, and then of course I became a multi-instrumentalist in that sense. So here I am today, struggling with all of the instruments. So
yeah, well, that's you say you're struggling, and that which makes you so great because you're still on a mission to become better at each one of them. That's the beauty of what we're doing. I always feel like I'll never have it figured out. It's writing songs and trying to become a better singer if I can be, and how do you preserve your voice? You weren't taught how to use your lips on the trumpet. I wasn't taught how to sing. And I was singing wrong. I wasn't using my stomach. I was using just my throat. And we grew up in these smoky bars. I mean, if you saw one person not smoking,
I agree.
Right? It was the opposite. And so I just damaged my voice so much that when I finally had throat surgery in 2005, which was not just like some little note, it was a cyst. It had just developed that kept hemorrhaging when I'd sneeze or whatever, and my range had dropped tremendously, and the noise in my throat, that instrument now had lost its whatever smoothness was there. Once I got it fixed, I had to go to speech therapy, and she said, Steve, this is how you do it. And since then, I've been able to use my voice, and my pitches got better, and it took a while, to get it back and to understand how to do that. I get that part of what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of destructive things that we musicians have encountered when we don't get proper training,
Right.
And when we try it as young people, we see people doing things, and sometimes our imagination takes us there. I remember watching Dizzy Gillespie. He had a jaw problem. I forgot the medical name for it, but they started calling it Gillespie pouch, where he blew his jaws out.
Wow,
and
that sounds awful.
And so people, but his skin detached. So when he blew his trumpet, his skin would detach from his neck and his jaws.
Yeah.
And then it appeared to be as though he was blowing air into them. But he was actually blowing air to the inside of his mouth correctly.
Yeah.
And he's probably one of the most phenomenal trumpet players that we ever know as a
It sounds like to me the trumpet is a dangerous instrument. I just want you to know that.
Well, what's more interesting, you talk about, like, we see pictures, like I say, imagination takes us there. But my son started off as a trumpet player before he became a guitarist and a singer. But he came to me one day looking through some of my albums. I had a lot of jazz albums, and he said, "Dad, I don't think I want to play trumpet anymore." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" Because I was teaching him correctly, like things. And he said, according to these albums, these writings on the back of these recordings, he said, all of these guys died very young, 24 years old and 35. And I said, well, there was other things.
Yeah.
There was car accidents and, some other harmful things.
That's funny.
But I'm saying it's interesting if musicians out there listening to this show, and any musicians who have children, that of parents that have children, make sure they get a teacher. If they get a teacher.
Yeah, even in sports, it's the same thing. You develop a golf swing, and maybe you need somebody to teach you along the way to do it the right way to protect your back. Anyway, but a lot of times in our lives we stumble into things. I mean, you find you make a deal on the baseball field on the diamond with your trumpet. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, but it turned me into that educator guy.
That's exactly right.
And I still find myself doing probably more educational things.
Sure. Because
I got invested into it. So I still do a lot of clinics. I travel to do a lot of workshops, work with one unique organization called Trumpet for Kids in Dallas, Texas, where, there's a foundation that gives away trumpets to deserving young people.
Yeah.
And then you have teachers that are willing to teach. So we do a lot of Zoom calls and meetings. We've done in the past. And then what's interesting through the pandemic, we had professional players who didn't have anything to do. People from like Earth, Wind and Fire's band, or some of the great jazz musicians.
Yeah.
We have people, creditable trumpet players who would come on the Zoom and talk to young people about what their experiences were like. Some really interesting people.
SuperiorCatfish.com. Check it out. Visit Mississippi.org. Plan a road trip to Mississippi. I'm with the great Dr. Alfonso Sanders.
That's all I need.
Up to $20,000 available for first-time home buyers. Hey folks, Steve Azar here. Helping is the heart of our friends at Guarantee Bank. They offer programs like the Home Buyer Equity Leverage Partnership Grant that can assist qualified first-time home buyers with up to $20,000 towards down payment and provide home ownership counseling to empower you on your journey. These funds are first come, first served. Learn more about this program and to apply now, go to gbtonline.com. Guarantee Bank, member FDIC.
You know that nowadays, most people go online to look at a business before they spend their money. What if the online information about your business is incorrect, or even worse, not very flattering? If your online presence isn't great, you may be losing customers. STMM Digital's trusted and highly trained team is the answer. We're ready to work with you to help your business capitalize on the power of digital marketing. Call 601-991-2305 or go to stmmdigital.com to get started today. In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
I know what I want, and I don't change my mind. I'm not telling.
Now we're rocking. Now we're jazzing ourselves because today's guest, Dr. Alfonso Sanders, knows jazz. It's what I listen to every morning. I would say for the last 30 plus years of my life, I'm listening to jazz, listen to a little Coltrane. I get all worked up. A little Miles Davis. We have a mutual friend in Branford, Marsalis. The Marsalises in Winton, and it's just amazing. That's the birthplace of America's music. When it's all said and done, Mississippi has inspired everyone that does this. And I'm definitely a product of growing up here. I can tell you that. And it changed my world. And I've been a happy person most of my life because of what I get to do, even though it tortures me or has tortured me back in the day, more so. What doesn't torture me is when I get to have a great meal, and that's Superior Catfish. Go to SuperiorCatfish.com. It's produced right here in Mississippi. And visit Mississippi.org, like we said, celebrate a road trip. All right, with your family here in Mississippi, it's hallowed ground, I'm telling you. I mean, we have a Georgia boy on the phone right now on the horn who made his home Mississippi. And I just feel like he was born and raised here. It's just born here, because just getting to know him personally, he feels like one of us, and he is one of us. Hey, Dr. Alfonso Sanders, let's talk about this time you took. You went off to finish your official teaching gear with insurance and all that, at Lincoln University in Missouri. What drew you there, and was it the plan just to go do it for a number of years and get back here to Mississippi?
Yeah, it was more like an investment. You know, I was asked a year prior to actually taking the job to go do it, and I, had some, knowledge about, what it means to be vested in other states, and it seemed like a great retirement privilege, and so I was getting to near the end of my desire to continue doing it on the university level. Right. Anyway. So I thought it was a part to have a finality, in my life. And then, of course, I took the position as provost there and vice president of academic affairs because I thought that I could actually help. And I think I did fairly well with it. And, of course, I hired some beautiful people to assist. And then, of course, the universities, as we know them, they have their own bureaucracies and their own limitations and other things. And I started to realize that even more when I got to that level of operation. And so COVID came right in the middle of that. I stayed there 2 years in the COVID after taking the job in 19. And at the end of 21, I decided I would, 3 years was going to be it. Right. And which made me fall short of my vision to actually be vested. But I felt like I didn't want to struggle with something that I was not contributing my best to. And I didn't think at that point I would be the right person for that job. So I decided to resign, and I ended up, coming back to Mississippi. So,
and lucky me.
Yeah, well, it is. Sometimes things catapult us into places, and I think that a large part of my life has been, crossroads that I didn't even get a chance to decide. I might have gotten to the crossroad, but then something else, propelled me into the direction it should go. And
right.
I think I'm fortunate for that, because sometimes as a human being, we can mess up a lot of things.
We can't make the wrong decision. We can't even make a decision sometimes. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
sometimes we think we know best.
Yeah. I want to jump to something now. Back in 2006, if we can go back, 19 years ago, the Fulbright Scholar to China. You studied the universal relationships of Chinese art and music to the Mississippi Delta folk art and music. That experience had to be crazy and special. Tell us about how that all came about.
Yeah, I was encouraged after having been at Valley State 2 years. I was encouraged to at least look at international study, and I started looking up material related to it, and there was a beautiful person there at Valley State's campus, Dr. Kathy Golden, who was working with international studies. And so students were coming there, to teach classes to students, and I found an opportunity there were faculty opportunities to study abroad. And so I applied for the Fulbright scholarship, and I was able to get it. I don't know. I guess they look at your paperwork, resume, and they make decisions. But it went through, and of course I was very fortunate to study there. But when I got there, I saw so many relationships between folk culture, because if you study any of the geographies, you understand that Africa in its central location to humanity, there are a lot of people been dispersed into other parts of the world for different, whatever those things have meant to developing other cultures. But I noticed a lot of similarities between drumming, from the African drumming and Chinese drumming and Asian drumming, period. If you even think about the drumming of the Japanese, incredible musicians. And then I started looking at the folk sounds of blues and the African pentatonic scale. Even people might not even know when we talk about folk music, most of our gospel music that we think are hymn books based on the fact that they took barroom melodies, which were related to many folk songs, in order to write gospel lyrics on top of them. So you find pentatonic scales, and you can play most gospel songs on the black keys on the piano, which is the 5-note pattern on the piano.
Right.
Yeah. And Amazing Grace is one of those special ones that you specifically hear it in Amazing Grace, you know.
Wow.
That's so cool. But I found ties between all of the folk concepts of music development, and I learned one of my highlights was learning to play the Chinese flute. So,
that's so cool. How long were you over there?
For a summer. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's jump to your workshops. They're very unique. They add humor, audience interaction, profound understanding of the music industry. You know, how important is the history to you and passing it on to the next generation, especially and also some of the work you've done before BB passed and after In His Name?
Yeah, things have changed drastically in terms of how workshops work. What you and I are doing is a Zoom meeting, right? And so I do some of those things even now today with Zoom meetings and calls, and so the technology is advanced to that degree. But when BB was coming, did that for about a decade, and we would, a lot of people would gather, bring their children over, and some of them would come in as though they're already professionals. Parents would have 2 guitars with them and amplifiers and all stuff. And BB would look at it and smile. And he asked me one time, specifically, he said, and this was interesting to me because he asked me, he said, Alfonso, are there any resources to help young Black American kids to learn about this blues music? Because there was an interesting, I would say far more interest seemed to have been shown from kids of other nationalities, right? Especially from what we call, I say, the white culture.
Right.
So he asked that question, and I thought about it. And lo and behold, Bill Howland Mad Perry was asked to do a residency at the Blues Museum in Clarksdale, where he was teaching, and they were studying the blues, right? And that's how we get Kingfish. But during that time, Kingfish was probably 8 or 9 years old when he met BB through those workshops. And
there you go. Okay, let's take a quick break, and I want you to continue there, because that to me is where the sweet spot is for all of us right now at this point in our lives, and you've been doing it forever. I love working with the next generation, younger artists. I get something out of them as well. We're always learning. Let's talk about that on the other side of the break. Superior Catfish, you deserve a break, and although I have friends down here that I'm not going to get into that. Let's just go to superiorcatfish.com and visit Mississippi.org, the birthplace of America's music. Like Dr. Alfonso Sanders, who went over to China, and still Mississippi has made its mark. I'm Steve Azar. We'll be right back.
I'm gonna be good, loving you. My bag's unpacked and I ain't just passing through. Baby, I'm gonna be good, loving you. Yeah, baby, I'm gonna be good.
$20,000 available for first-time home buyers. Hey folks, Steve Azar here. Helping is the heart of our friends at Guarantee Bank. They offer programs like the Home Buyer Equity Leverage Partnership Grant that can assist qualified first-time home buyers with up to $20,000 towards down payment and provide home ownership counseling to empower you on your journey. These funds are first come, first served. Learn more about this program and to apply now, go to gbtonline.com. Guarantee Bank, member FDIC.
You already know.
God knows you're there waiting to save me. Over mighty water, cautious claws, mighty water.
Got a short segment left with my pal, Dr. Alfonso Sanders. You have an appetite for a little lunch, a little dinner. It's Superior Catfish. Head on over to superiorcatfish.com. Made in Mississippi. Dr. Alfonso Sanders is my guest today. All right, let's continue talking about this. I love BB asking that question. I love how you have a dramatic pause and you have to ponder that and think on that. But you bring up Chris Stone, Kingfish. Mm-hmm. Because of what you guys have been doing in the Delta Blues Museum up in Clarksdale and having these opportunities for kids to be able to come and learn from the greats and give them a chance to see if it's in their DNA. And because it is, they say it's in the water. But how effective have you seen this with other musicians like Kingfish?
Well, we'll always have anomalies. We'll have people who make that cut, as we call it. You know, it's like athletics. Some of the greatest players we probably will never know. But in music, it happens, you know, on the same level. But Kriston, Kingfish, as we call them, happen to have gotten in a program at the Blues Museum there in Clarksdale, and Bill Perry was asked to be the blues, you know, the blues representative of what the blues really was, the history of that playing. So he made those young kids rotate on instruments because Kriston was a bass player. He played right, and I had an opportunity to teach him some when he was in the orchestra at Clarksdale in the school system. And he was, you know, he was playing the upright bass. He was learning to be a bass player, and but he found his way on the guitar because Bill, of course, had those students to work on all instruments. The drums, they had to learn to play a little piano, learn to play guitar, learn to play bass, and sing. So in the process, Kriston started to develop, and it's not to my doing. I just would go there to to tell them about the B.B. King symposiums, tell them about the things that I started at Mississippi Valley State, and especially for the summers when B.B. would come in to do the workshops, and I would be the one facilitating the whole thing and doing that. Kriston came, him and others, and he showed this, you know, this kind of prowess, if you could tell. But I always tell people when I talk to them, there were a lot of incredible guitar players that Kriston was not quite ahead of at that time in his life. But Kriston had a heart and a fervency about what he was doing, and you could tell that if you did, and I tell all musicians, and this, I hope people who are listening understand this. If you don't have the heart and the desire, the drive to be a musician, it will turn into too much work for you. And once it becomes work, there's no more fun to be had. And then you'll start becoming that person who is kind of a little grumpy, grouchy about how this is going down and what's happening with it. Now, I know business is a big part of it too, but you still got to have a love of the arts. You got to have a love of what you do to make yourself.
Well, you got to have it where things are not going, even the music. So I've had situations in my life, I guess, talking about my personal experience where I knew things weren't working with the record label or we weren't jiving and all that, but the crowds were loving it. It didn't matter what was wrong on the outside or off stage. When you got on stage, it all went away. It's always gone away. When I got into the writing room to write about the pain, it always went away. When I was in the studio, it always went away. So I know that it's been the medicine to cure, like the polio cures polio. It's been the medicine every year to fix, you know, the parts of the business that haven't worked out, you know, so you have to have that love affair. It's got to be unconditional, and you got to get ready to get beat up by the other sides of it. But it works out in the long run. But you're right about that. You have to be madly in love with it.
Yeah, I call it losing the desire to dream. And if you lose that dream of being a little better or a little more conscious and having that sweet feeling that when I pick my instrument up to practice, that it's that romance between me and that instrument, right? And it's hard to replace it. And if you don't have it and you lose it, then it's just gone.
Time to move on.
It was a bad relationship.
It's a bad relationship. Time to move on. Do something else. It's interesting. I know how much you practice. And I know the greats practice, and you love to practice, and you're driven to practice, and you're on a mission, right, to get better. And you get excited about when you cross into new territories, new discoveries with your instrument. And
you know what's interesting, though, Steve. I'm gonna plug this in. We do those tours things, and I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity, to be playing live. That's a beautiful thing, and especially with other musicians who are interested in their own craft. But I play a saxophone solo, and a lot of those, like the songs that you invite me on stage to do, I come on as your special guest, right?
Yeah. But
you've never held me to playing the exact same solo ever. So each time I have this freedom of thought when I'm practicing, I'm always thinking, what is another thing to do, and I don't think about it just like that. It just comes across as I'm practicing. I'm learning something new. I might try it out, on those songs.
Well, you don't think I don't know that, and you don't think why I love it is because I truly get to know how you're feeling at that moment. Dr. Alfonso Sanders is my guest, part 1, part 2, today's part 2. Can't thank him enough. Superior Catfish allows me to put on this show and have the conversations that I get to have. So grateful. Go to superiorcatfish.com and visit Mississippi.org. Oh, yeah. We are the birthplace of America's music, and we are one Mississippi later on.
I'm Steve Azar. In a Mississippi Minute, all 60 of them, where you can take your sweet time.
A SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.